'tis many's a gay night, from dark till daylight, I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for Sweet Omagh Town.
Once again, a very good evening to you. If you've just joined us, you're listening to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio, and by the magic of BT and O2 or whoever provider you're with, let's hope Declan Ford's on the other end of the line.
Loud and clear in Mountfield.
Ah, good. And hopefully on the other line I hope to talk to Paddy Hunter. Hello, Paddy.
Yes, indeed, Donald and Declan.
Oh, Paddy, long time no see, Paddy. How are you?
Not too bad, thank God. Surviving
Good. You're suffering rightly here, anyhow. You'll get through it like the rest of us.
Well, sure, you have to get on with it, don't you? But when it's worse when you're a freelancer as well, because you're tied up and nothing to do at the same time.
Yeah.
I have to say, before I start, Sweet Omagh Town has been absolutely brilliant. It's my nightly, before I go to bed, I stick it on, listen to it, and whoever's on gets the full airing, and some brilliant ones, and fair play to you for doing it. It's
thanks a million.
Thank you, Paddy.
Brings everybody together.
It does. That's the reason we done it, just at the times it was in it, just to get people maybe some sort of sense of connection, because in Italy and places they were sort of calling to each other from balconies and things, and I said to Declan, sure, we'll throw these out and see. We didn't think there would be anyway much interest at all, but we're pleasantly surprised now. You know.
Brilliant.
But anyway, Paddy.
Well, I think, Paddy, we're a bit like yourself. Like you have a great interest in the kind of history of Omagh and the fabric of Omagh, and we've been collecting these voices for nearly 30 years. And you know what? We're hearing stories about a kind of a hidden Omagh that doesn't make the history books. It's just the ordinary history that, in its own way, is extraordinary.
There's no doubt about that. I was listening to Jackie McGill, and bearing in mind my own father grew up on Gallas Hill around Jackie's time as well, and probably a wee bit earlier than that, and from the tin roofs on Fairmount cottages to the dump bank to the hockey pitches it was called, and all them stories come flooding back to me because my father told me them all. And all my family was originally from Gallas Hill and Brook Street, as we know, and it's very much the old Omagh that we're hearing from these guys. And you talk, you had Paddy McCloon on, late Paddy McCloon, talking about the railway, and the great grandfather came to Omagh for the railway. So it's great to hear all those stories. But it does recapture a lot of things that a lot of people have missed. And I think that's the important thing.
Oh yeah, well tell me this, Paddy. Are the Hunter family, an old Omagh family, or some of the interviewees they had, they came in like Paddy McCloon came in on the railway and that.
Well, my great grandfather William and his brother George were involved in the railway in Belfast, and it's funny the way families go, lads, because William came to Omagh in around 1870. Around that, wee bit maybe before that or whatever, and he turned to be a Roman Catholic.
Right.
And his brother Charles remained in Belfast and died in Belfast as Church of Ireland.
Uh-huh.
It's funny how families split up. He was a railway driver,
right,
and William was a porter. And William came to Omagh as a porter and remained here and married, set up his family, and he died in 1922. But the family goes back, obviously. His mother, Jane, died in 1901, and I think she was 85 years of age. So there's a good heritage in them, anyway. They've lasted the right way.
Yeah, like my own side of the family, that's how they ended up in Tyrone. Again, they came up from Monaghan. They worked in the GNR, and 2 generations of the family. It was very much a family affair. Which I think Paddy McCloon alluded to. The railways had that kind of sense of, you had a job almost for life, and they looked after you.
I would agree with you. The railways was a big thing. He lived in railway houses when he came, first of all, and his oldest son Michael was born in Campsie in 1876. He was married in St Peter and St Paul's on Brook Street. He married Catherine in 1875. Michael was born in Campsie, Patrick was born in Meeting House, another Paddy, by the way. Jane was born around the same time, shortly after that, in Meeting House Hill. William James, who's my grandfather, was born in Irishtown. Sarah was born in Railway Terrace. John was born in Culmore. Charles was born in Culmore. Charles, of course, the councillor, who went on to be a councillor. And Agnes was born in Brook Street. So they've been around a while, you know, but
Certainly
the connections are there. But you mentioned the railway. It's interesting to note that Charles worked with the Ulster Herald. He went on to work with the Ulster Herald.
Oh, right.
And his brother, John, and Vincent, Michael, and young Charlie all worked in the Herald as well over the years, you know, so it's a good connection there too. You know?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, talk about the railway connection. I had two great uncles, and one lived in Dublin and one lived in Strabane. One worked on CIE eventually, and the Strabane man was GNR. And my late aunt, who was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, said that Abercorn Terrace was the place where the uncle lived in Dublin. And I discovered that it was the other uncle in Strabane lived in Abercorn Terrace. Right. And I thought, you know, Alzheimer's, you know, her memory is going. But it turned out there was an Abercorn Terrace in Dublin, again, built specifically for the railway workers. And Lord Abercorn, was one of the shareholders. So the name, the residence is after the owner, you know. So, but it's a fascinating history, isn't it?
Oh, I'm amazed by it, you know. And you know, I've tried to find out. I know there was railway houses in Irishtown and railway houses on Railway Terrace. So obviously he lived in those when you know, for the children being born or whatever. But you mentioned there about, you know, families and that, you know, and places named after him. Charles Hunter, who became a councillor in the 30s, former chairman of Omagh St Enda's, the son Michael played, Vincent played, all the family, you know, all the nephews and that all played football or whatever. But Charles became an urban councillor and was a councillor right up until the change in the council way back in the early 70s. And Hunter Crescent is named after him. You know,
I thought that, yeah.
That's right.
You could like Maclay Park named after late Tom Maclay.
That's right, who the clothes shop, the Drapers.
Yeah. All named after former councillors. I think that's
right.
All these places.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Paddy, sorry, can I ask you how your interest became in your Facebook page, the Brookmid and the World? Can you tell me about that?
I suppose we were going back looking at the family history, and all along, as you went along, every time you went along, Brook Street was mentioned. There was no getting away from Brook Street, and it didn't matter what you were talking about. And the familiar names kept coming up: the Devlins, the Brogans, the Hamiltons, the McCuskers, you know, Hannah Shannon, yes. You know, all these names, Lizzie Smith, the Givens, all these names kept coming up. So I went and done a wee bit of research or whatever and got some wonderful information. And, you know, look back at started obviously with the 1901 census, and the amount of people that lived in Brook Street was phenomenal. So we just decided at that time, way back maybe 2 years ago, just to set up a wee Facebook page with a few photographs or whatever, just to gauge a bit of interest in old Omagh. You know, really, that's what it was about. And all of a sudden, it was deluged with photographs and lots of information. But it just whittled away. It died, really, to be fair, until about a month ago. I was just sitting here one day, and as we all are, of course, at the minute, and there was a couple of messages to Brook Street and the World, as the Facebook page is called. There's people calling in from America and different places looking for information. So it got me started again, you know, and since that, I've discovered the likes of, like, St. Peter and St. Paul's was built in 1829, the first Catholic church in the town of Omagh. Obviously, Drummer was built in the 1700s before that, but in the town of Omagh, St. Peter and St. Paul's was built. And then you had Brook Street, you had Castle Street, Abbey Street, Castle Lane, Back Lane, Fountain Lane, River Row. You know, all those places were all a hive of activity. You had everything there. You know, you had a military barracks where Hunter's old house would have been at one stage. That would have been a military barracks. Across the road was a fever hospital. You had sweet shops, you had mechanics, you had builders. You had everything you needed for a town was in that sort of square area. You had football teams playing, you had likes of Abbey Villa, St. Joseph's, all played in the backfield, which was called Alcorn's Field, which was where Brookmount Crescent is now. And there's a few photographs knocking about from years ago. You can see from way up on the top of Brookmount, looking across, you can see Mount St. Columba, as it's called, of course, where the parochial houses are built now, and all that there is built before and after, I suppose, in the early 1800s when St. Peter and St. Paul's was built, and then added on the belfry or whatever at the front. You can sort of see that in the distance. And it's funny because we had connections right through there up until the 40s and 50s. Well, Charlie died, sadly, on Abbey Street in 1974. He was the sort of last of that older generation, you know. So he died in 74, but he lived in Abbey Street, and his daughter still lives in Convent View, remarkably. So we've still family connections there, still in that part of the world. But it's amazing to look back at the history of the town and how it has all changed and how it's evolved and how it has all sort of developed. All changed from around 1965, 1966, when the council at that time decided they were going to get rid of what they called the slum clearance. Now, Mark McGrath obviously has done an awful lot of work. I'm sure you know Mark.
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
Like myself, he's sort of a nerd when it comes to all the history stuff and looking back at stuff. But he would have done a lot of on Cane Park and Dromore Road in that area. And a lot of people from Fountain Lane and, you know, the McCulloughs, the Galeases and people like that, all from that area. They all moved out there initially, out to Cane Park. And then all of a sudden, by the early 70s, when St. Colin Kills, as I would have called it, obviously Holy Family now, when it was built, Brook Street just evaporated completely, and that was the end of Brook Street, bar the big houses that were there for a few years at Convent View, where the likes of the late Josie Sloan lived and people like that.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, there's just a couple of houses there now, and I'm glad to say Marion's still alive and well and living there. And, you know, it'll be Charlie's daughter, as I said, the last of a long line of tradition in that area. And it's sad to see how an area has just completely evaporated in just over 50 years.
And that's the oldest community in Omagh as well, isn't it?
It and Gallas Hill would be the oldest. And I'm delighted to say I have connections in both, because my father was reared there. His father eventually ended up going there in the First World War. He fought for Kitchener's Army, as they were called, and then Skillens. He went away in 1915, and at that time he lived in Church Hill, which is, again, 14 Church Hill, which is sadly no longer with us either. But it was opposite where Ignatius Sally's is there now, just around there. So many families from there, the likes of the Nugents and all, they all lived up that part of the town as well. He ended up going up to Gallas Hill as well. And I was talking to my cousin recently, and she was telling me, I think there was 14 living, or 15 living at one time in a 3-bedroom house in Fairmount Cottages. So it just shows you how it was at that time, you know. And that's not, you know, overly long ago, early 60s.
Dr. Mitchell remembered as a young man going out with his father, who was a GP also, into places in Castle Street and Brook Street where two families lived in the houses, and one would excuse themselves and head up and administer health to someone else living upstairs. That was quite the norm.
I've come across that quite a lot. I've come across quite a lot of that in the 1901, 1911 census. If you look, there could be 3 families living in a house in Brook Street, the same in 1911, where you have all these different names. But if you know the history of the area, you'll know what those people lived with, you know, relatives and that. The likes of Ray Moore obviously come out of that area. Matt Doherty, the famous footballer. Loads of editors, doctors, lawyers, solicitors, people from all over the world and all big jobs all came out of that community, which is amazing to think of. And it is sad to see it no longer there. My own grand-uncle Paddy lived there all his life. He lived for some people of a certain vintage will remember, he lived in a cottage further on up where the brook was, on Brook Street. He never got married. And it's amazing where they all ended up. And a lot of them went to England, America, different parts, but they still all would have that residence towards Brook Street, Abbey Street, and those areas, which is it's nice to know that they still resonate that. I had people home recently from England, never here before in maybe a lifetime, and we're amazed to see the whole area where their father Tony grew up, for example. You know, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Do you remember the houses that used to be at the bottom of Castle Street, Paddy?
And
where the car park is now?
I remember them knocked down, and you had you were talking about the late Midge Mulholland, God rest him.
Yes.
I remember that's where Midge and the boys used to all be.
Oh, right.
I remember growing up as a child, because I would have loved, my aunt Molly lived in Brogan Crescent for a time after she got married, and I remember going to her house, and you would have went down Castle Street, and you would have cut up across, maybe up Fountain Lane, back lane across, but they were all houses, old houses, and there used to be I think it was a bicycle shop at the end of the street there, or a bicycle repairman or something. But I remember the old houses there, and I remember them all dilapidated and knocked down. And sadly, I'm old enough to remember them being knocked down in the car park.
And then, do you remember the lady who used to stand at the top of Castle Street? I remember going to school. Was she Maggie McDowell? She lived in that. There's a lovely red brick kind of houses just at the top of Castle Street, the left-hand side. And you'd be walking past, and she would nab any schoolboy to run down. You were given a shilling or whatever to go down and get her soda bread.
I remember her about the place, okay. I don't remember her standing now, but I do remember. But there's so many characters from that area.
Oh, yeah. And I think you could still see the marble slab of the counter. I think it had been a fish shop.
At that area, it's funny, the likes of that houses beside where the pizza place is now, I mean, exactly the same. And I've come across a couple of old photographs, and there's one particular photograph that I came across recently, and it's available on the website. But I retook it again myself just one day there. I was out walking. In the current lockdown, that's all you can do. So it was a photograph of Brook Street, of Lower Abbey Street, Castle Street onto Abbey Street, and the turn up onto Brook Street was there. All the houses were still there, but one of the military parts is in the distance, and you can sort of make the shape of the house out at the very top, in the top of the photograph. So I sort of set it up to take it again. But it's amazing to think that Mark put up a photograph not that long ago, and this particular house at the end of Castle Street on the left-hand side, just on the junction into Brook Street, was there then, probably in the 80s, before it was all knocked down.
Yes.
Was there again a way back, a century ago almost, and you can make it out the exact same framework of the windows, the whole lot. You have to look at it and sort of examine it a wee bit, but if you look at it closely, you'll see it exactly the same. And I took the same photograph. The military building's only one that remains exactly the same.
Declan, you mentioned a bicycle shop, Declan. I think, from memory, it was Nelson Allen had a motorbike shop there in Castle Street, because I remember the first Honda 50 I ever bought, I bought of Nelson Allen in Castle Street, all right, and that's...
Brogan's had a place there as well, I remember.
Yes.
For a while, and they moved across the street, but they were there as well.
They were on that side of the street as well.
Showing their age, lads, aren't they?
I remember going to the primary, going down that entry side MJ O'Kane's, or I know there's MJ O'Kane's anywhere, McElroy's is. I remember all those houses there, those with a half door on them. I remember them very well as a young lad going to school there, yeah.
I come across a couple of great photographs. There's a couple sent to me of Mrs. McCullough from O'Kane Park now, or I'm not sure if she's still alive. I hope she is. But I remember seeing the photograph, and I was able to match it up with today, if you know what I mean, where the barrier went across to block people from going up into the parochial grounds.
Yes.
And there was a fence there. But I remember going to the old school. I went there for 1 week, and I ended up taking measles. I was going to St. Colin Kills. Ended up taking measles, and there was that big a demand. I was off for 2 weeks, and when I went back, there was no place for me in the school.
No room in school for Paddy here.
No room at the end. So there you go. So I was only there for a short time, but I remember the school was only built at that time.
Right.
Well, I've spent many a happy day at St. Connor's since there. Culmore and St. Connor's after that. So
sorry, Paddy, cut across you. Tell me about the rope walk. Or the rope works, was it?
The rope walk, I don't know much about it. I remember my father talking about it.
Yeah.
And, I don't know where it came about or where the name came about. Yeah. Jackie McGill would certainly be the man that would
ask him something,
know exactly.
Yes.
But I know the name, the same as the pads.
Where was the pads? Tell me exactly.
The pads were in behind. Do you know where the steps come down the back of Sacred Heart Chapel?
Very well.
The big steps. Well, there was just sort of literally across from there. There was a walkway in, and it brought you around behind the houses
at Abbey Street. No.
Brook Street.
Brook Street.
The back of Hannah Shannon's, where the old,
right.
chapel was, and just brought you around there, around to the side. But the famous, and John Sheridan, who's currently locked in away in South Africa somewhere at the minute, from that area, was telling me about it many years ago, and the likes of Brian Rush and people like that, who have joined the site, Duke McColgan, people like that there who've been away from the town for years and years and years, just reminiscing about the whole area. And that's what it's about, lads. That's what it really is about. It's about people sending a few photographs, talking about the old area, the old names, as I said. The names still pop up. I look back at a West Ward electoral list for 1949, and there must be 150 names on it. And I'm delighted to see my own John Hunter, Mary Hunter, Patrick Hunter Sr., Vincent Hunter, all still living in Brook Street at that time. Now, in later years, John and Vincent, that they all headed away. But Paddy remained there. So his connections in our family now go back many, many years. So I'm delighted to say I can trace that back. But I'm sure you'll agree that's important to have that heritage in your own town, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, and it's amazing, the landmarks that are in the town, the way the pubs, seemingly, they might change ownership and the names, but the pubs are kind of a landmark, and the old shops, and I was delighted that even when the Royal Arms was sold, at least it sort of maintained the kind of the
facade,
the vestige of the original building there.
I came across a photograph recently of the military arms, just up from the military arms, just where the Hog's Head is now.
Yes.
What they call something else. And it's amazing. You'd know to look at it where it was. And a lot of photographs, you will know, if you look, there's certain parts of the town haven't changed a bit. Bridge Street remains as it was. If you look at Bridge Street, you sort of know it's Bridge Street. The same as other parts of the town. There's a lot of places that have changed. But the facade of them, you sort of know them buildings are there. And I'll think back, sadly, where the Omagh bomb was, obviously, those where McGinn's big place was, that former Bank of Ireland, still there. Exactly the same as it was. Many today I looked out of it when I was working on radio. That was my office was right at the window there, and I was just thinking back. People, that has been the same for hundreds of years, or 100 odd years. It's amazing. But I think it's important that people do retain their local heritage and their memory and their history of the area, because the brook still runs out there. The brook runs out at the bottom of Abbey Ridge, where it used to run as a babbling brook, shall we call it? It's still there. Yeah. It's still there, and that's the amazing thing, And I think back to the likes of John Hunter and his family all end up going to England, and Sarah, different ones, all the different family connections, and it's quite dramatic as well when I think back to 1915. Before this pandemic, this flu, there was obviously quite a bit of tuberculosis, and my grandfather lost 2 sons, his mother and sister, all in the space of maybe 6 months in 1915, all because of TB.
Oh, God.
And it's amazing to think of that. He was away at the war at the time as well. So it's very, very... There's a lot of poignancy, a lot of sadness in it, but the one thing I think about it, when you think back of Brook Street or Gallows Hill, is the camaraderie, and I know you got that from Jackie McGill and listening to the boys and everybody talking about the way the town was, but it was very much your own community, and I think we've lost a lot of that. I think that's the sad thing. That'll be the sad thing now when you do look back. And
but I don't think it's lost. I think it's just sleeping. I think it's still there. Not sure.
When you look back at the wonderful things that was done in Gallows Hill way back in the 80s with Community Festival. The Union Days and the great street parties that O'Kane Park had and places like that there. You sort of know where places have still heart. Strathroy's one of them, for example. They just do good work that they're doing at the minute. And it would be great to see that all coming back again. Maybe something to look forward to in the future, but it's interesting to look back at all the history of Omagh.
Oh, yeah. And I suppose to indicate, say, to somebody who has left Omagh, years and years ago and is perhaps listening to this, if you walk out to Killyclogher Road, to Killyclogher, it's all one. And when I was growing up in Omagh, Killyclare was a separate entity.
Well, now you try telling Noel McGinnis it's not separate.
I would tell you, I would agree with.
Well, no.
It's a funny thing when you mention Killyclare. A lot of people from Brook Street are buried in Killyclare Cemetery.
Yes.
And I don't understand, and nobody can come back and tell. I think it may have been to do with the costing. I don't know, but there's a lot of history there as well. You know, a lot of people from Brook Street and that area all ended up buried in Killyclare, and a lot of people as well. And this is a very interesting one to come out recently, and I suppose in VED and all that there. So many people from Brook Street of various persuasions, and Brook Street was interdenominational at that particular time, way back in the 1800s and early 1900s. Went and joined the military.
Of course.
And came to Omagh with the military and ended up in Brook Street from St Lucia's, because that was obviously the base for the Royal Enniskillens at that time, with the Boer War and all those earlier wars as well. So there's a great history that way too. And again, the names, when you're looking through old heralds and stuff, as we often do, you're not supposed to. When you're looking for one thing, you end up looking for 20 other things you're not supposed to.
No.
But the name, you know, Catholic, Protestant, didn't matter what it was. If you lived in Brook Street, you were fighting in the army, whatever war it would have been, your name has popped up. And that's amazing to see as well, you know. So a lot of heritage. I love to have done archaeology in it. That's the one thing that I often wonder. Those people who did do all the redevelopments there, did they ever do the, you know, archaeology? The likes of St. Peter and St. Paul's, or I know the priest that built St. Peter and St. Paul's his remains were moved to the back of Sacred Heart Church. But it'd be wonderful to know if there was archaeology done in the rest of the town or the rest of that area. God knows what you'd find.
That's right, the hidden history.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
The strange thing that I find about that, sometimes we talked about, you know, they were described as Victorian slums and various things, but out of those slums, the Roman Catholic people certainly built a huge church, and I wonder, you know, what your take on that is. How could they literally afford to do such a building, and how did they take it on, and why did they take it on, and why did they change the name to Sacred Heart, I wonder?
Yeah. Well, obviously Sacred Heart was built late 1800s, opened in 1899, and I think there was a need for it because St. Peter and St. Paul's had a couple of seats, but it was a stone floor or a clay floor. It was all standing basically, and the population, I suppose, was starting to grow at that time as well. And I think at that particular time, just wanted to build a monument, more so not so much for the day as it was in it, but for the future generations. And they wanted to have something sort of there and that. I know Liam McSorley, and I'm sure you know Brendan and Liam,
very well,
sent me a wonderful cuttings recently of the original programme, or an event programme. It was produced in New York for the opening of Sacred Heart Church, and it went through the whole history of it. It's remarkable how it was done. And the land, obviously, as well, given by a gentleman in Brook Street for the building of the likes of the Christian Brothers coming, the convent coming. You know, all those sort of stories are only now maybe being recollected, because some of the history of Sacred Heart Church is fascinating, how it was built. The Boyles obviously had a big say in it. But I think, you know, when you read the history of the church and going and looking back over it, it appears to be for now, for the future. It wasn't built for the good people then at that time to sort of, or obviously it was for the glory of God and all that sort of thing that they talked about, but it was sort of as a something for the future. But of course that whole site has changed in recent years as well, from the original pictures as well and the original drawings of the church way back in the late 1800s. It's amazing how it's all changed as well, how it, you know, eventually evolved into what it is now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't remember it, but there's people tell me, and I've seen photographs of it obviously as well, there was a house right up to the gable wall of the chapel.
My goodness.
At the top of Castle Street, right up to the gable wall. And the event, it's I'm going to say recent times, but I think it's maybe the last 60 or 70 years that it actually has been changed. But where the entrance is on the right-hand side now, as you look at the front of the church, the new entrance, that was all a house.
Yes.
And obviously Dunelms was up to
The other
left
side,
of it.
where St Joseph's is now, where the hall is.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mhm.
It's amazing how that has evolved.
It is.
That's a story on its own. There's no doubt.
I tell you, I mean, myself and Donald had a great evening in the Sacred Heart with the late Joe Gibbon
Oh, what a man!
and Stevie McKenna. And when Joe was talking about the history and the various priests involved. You know, they may have been dead for 100 years, but Joe talked about them as though they had just left the building.
Exactly, absolutely. I think it was the late Reverend O'Kane. I think would have built St Peter and St Paul's. I think it was Father McNamee would have built Sacred Heart. He actually, I think, died before it was built. It was finished.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I can't just remember off the top of my head. But Joe Gibbon, an absolute legend in this town. And if anybody knew history of Omagh and knew the people of Omagh, it was Joe Gibbon.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was there for your baptism and he was there for the death.
Yeah.
So many people.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about priests and priests come and go, but him and Dickie Kennedy, God rest him as well, were very good friends. And I know Christopher done something behind the scenes that they were trying to get it videoed or whatever. They didn't actually get videoed, but they sat one night and talked, like yourselves, about the history of the church.
Yes.
And the late Joe knew everything there is to know. I'm glad to say I knew him very well. He was a very good friend. And my father and him were excellent friends. My father would have helped out locking up the chapel and doing bits and pieces. Joe, the routine of locking up the church, and I've never seen anything like it. And I see if he missed one wee piece, he'd have started again.
Yes.
As an old cub running about, I was thinking, what is he doing? What is he doing? But no, he had a routine, and there was a set way of doing locking the church, and a set way of putting out the lights, and a set way of doing things,
Right.
and he done it his way. I think he was there from the 40s. That's
Would have
right.
been, yeah.
That's right. No, he was just a fixture. You know, he was there. He was part of the fabric of the building.
Yeah,
You know?
and I
Oh, no. He was a lovely man.
Who's this man in the black?
Yeah.
Who's doing that? He's
Yeah.
not a priest. How's he doing that? But when you got to know him,
Yeah.
it was fascinating. I
Yeah.
knew everything. I
was
knew
a
every
character, yeah.
stick and stone in that church.
I remember asking Joe one time, hope he's happy, about the rumour that there was always somebody killed, maybe putting the cross on the spire at the very top of the building. But in reality, Joe says it didn't happen. There was a guy killed, but he was actually killed. He fell off a ladder inside the middle porch and died a few days later. And he directed me to his grave. He's buried in Drumna Bay outside Castlederg. And the headstone is almost a replica of the miniature spires in the Sacred Heart Church. If you're ever down that way in the old graveyard, take a look at it. I forget his name, but the headstone's still there of the guy.
Joe knew everything.
He
though,
did
but,
indeed. He did.
He knew every stick and stone in that church.
He certainly did. Mm-hmm.
The whole history of that area is fascinating. There's no getting away from that. From the Labour Hall to St Patrick's Hall and all those halls and all those wee small places and all the Cow Commons and Gallas Hill and right into St Peter and St Paul's, the pads and all those things. You could write it. You could write more than just one book for it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. But it's the people of the town, I think, it's the character of them. When you think, and if you fast forward to the events of 1998 and see how we coped with that, and history will tell that, any other town could have fell apart. I think the people of Omagh had the courage to deal with this and deal with it in any way they could,
I think it's the resilience of growing up in an area where people had absolutely nothing. And that was the reality of Brook Street. They had nothing. But yet they became doctors, lawyers, solicitors, editors, newspaper people, broadcasters, footballers. Anything they wanted to be, they were able to do it. And that just shows the resilience of the community. And that's what I'm trying to capture. And I'm musicians as well, because I can't forget Ray Moore and the Moore family. Of course, their grandfather and people all came from that area too.
Yes.
So you had all, rich tapestry of Irish culture and all sorts of cultures in the one area. And it's amazing. And that's what I'm trying to capture with Brook Street in the world. It's a simple site, but it's trying to bring sort of memories to life again, and through photographs. Very difficult to get photographs, though. It's just quite remarkable to think that there isn't an awful lot of them about.
There weren't, because and Haldy Mitchell often said to me that his problem was that there were events that were recorded, not people. Therefore, he said, and this was a major event, and someone could afford to take a photograph. They weren't taken, really. So.
I come across a great photograph of the late Michael Hunter, who would be grand uncle, his son was Charlie Hunter, the bread man, I suppose, and everybody knows Charlie Hunter, God rest him,
Yes.
the bread man from Centenary Park. He knew everybody and everybody knew him.
Yes.
But Michael was a baker himself and lived in Gorton. But there's a wonderful photograph on the Facebook page of when he was a young man. But he looked like something out of, one of those documentaries or one of those period dramas. The big moustache and the dapper suit and all. And I don't know where the photograph ever was taken or who took it, but it was like Einstein, Anne Rice or Mary Gormley or some of the relatives got it,
Mm-hmm.
But it's an amazing photograph, but it just shows you what could have been done,
Oh, yeah. And just talking generally about photographs, is it an awful pity that people don't write at the back of the photograph who it is and where it was taken? And I'm sure you, Paddy, you found yourself like me, looking at old photographs and trying to figure out who is this person, where was this, when was it taken? For an historian, they are invaluable.
They absolutely are. And it's remarkable as well, not just faces, but pieces of the area. I've looked at 3 or 4 photographs and said, I know that area. I'm trying to figure out. And all of a sudden, there's 2 telegraph poles. And the 2 telegraph poles in the photograph remained in the same position right up until the 80s. It's just the way they were planted into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to direct myself to where those houses were.
Ah, right, yes, yes.
And then we were lucky enough, we found out who the people were as well. There's a couple of colour photographs there, actually. They're recoloured, obviously, but they were taken probably in the 40s, 50s, maybe even early 60s. But the lampposts remained in the same position because I was able to go back. Another thing as well, chimney stacks is another thing. On some houses, chimney stacks remained the same.
Of course,
And that's funny how you can pick up, I suppose, a learning curve. You're only learning. And the more this lockdown's going on, you have to learn a lot of new tasks. And looking at old photographs and trying to figure out where things are and where they were, well, that was able to do it, But I think back, we were able to go back, as I said, to my great-great-grandmother who died in 1902. And obviously she was born in 1815. So we can go back in our wee step. Personally speaking, I'd be delighted. But if this reignites people's interest in a bit of social history,
yes.
the likes of Vincent Brogan there is doing wonderful work with.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yes.
And we're all in the same sort of mode. We're all trying to grasp back at that wee bit of past.
Yes.
And find out your own wee bit of history.
Yeah.
Where you come from. But it's just
fascinating
subject.
There's the old maxim, you'll not know where you're going to until you know what you've come from. I think there's a truth in it. And isn't it? I get a kick of it. I remember checking out the 1901 census for the first time, and 2 great grandfathers of mine in Dromore and a place called Listonedden outside Finsna. And when you see the signature of your great grandfather, he comes alive.
Exactly. And God, I wouldn't give to you a photograph of that. The rest of those people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to think that Charles, who's a railway driver in Belfast, his daughter was called Sarah. She married a man called Henry Payton, and they ended up going to live in Derry. Now, he died in Derry only in the 50s. And I find this remarkable that, and no matter what I can do, I cannot find any relatives for that man in Derry at the minute, or Henry Payne he was, sorry.
Yes.
He was in Brogan Yard, but he was all over the world. He was one of those, Boer War type soldiers. He would have fought, for king and country or whatever. But he died in Derry, and I just can't. It's remarkable. I can't find any relatives. He lived. I can't remember what the street was, but it's still there. And I just can't find anybody connected to him at all,
Yeah.
But it would be a good connection if you could, that way.
Oh, you never know what's going to come out of the woodworm at all. No.
To tie it all up.
Paddy, how do people get in touch with you, or what's the Facebook site called? Or
Well, the Facebook's called Brook Street and the World, and it's on Facebook, and you can PM or fire on whatever photographs they want or whatever. The likes of Liam Moore and Ray Moore and different people, Mark McGrath and Vincent Brogan, they've all supplied photographs, and it's amazing to think. But as I said earlier, you've likes of Sean Sheridan currently in lockdown in South Africa, living in England.
Yes.
Brian Rush in Boston. Different people all around the world all still have Brook Street connections.
Yeah. Funny.
Lane,
Yeah.
Lane. It's amazing.
Many years ago, I had a quick chat with was it Tony Brogan? Was Tony Totten and the Christian Brothers? Was that Tony?
Tony,
Tony thought
I think I have a recording of Tony taking me round the Jail Square and round Brook Street and round Castle Street. So it's very short.
Michael Brogan has been brilliant as well. Michael has been a great supplier of information as well. Because like so many people, he was born and reared there.
Yeah. Well, I hope Tony doesn't mind. If I can unearth this wee interview, it's only about 15 or 20 minutes. I suppose for a documentary, I think Joe Mahan, who was in charge of Radio Foyle at the time, asked me to do it for him. And I think I have the tape here somewhere. So if with Tony's permission, I'll put it on after this wee interview, Paddy, if you don't mind, and we can end this up now.
Problem.
Here, thanks very much.
It
It is.
Thank you very much, Paul and Declan. And
Paddy, great chatting to you. We will meet face to face when this is all over.
We will indeed.
oh God.
Where will we meet? What? MJ O'Kane's?
We could meet
Or
the
Gar-
Christmas tree at the stage.
Mickey Gormley's par. Maybe Mickey Gormley's house in there.
And X will mark the spot.
Or Lizzie Smith's shop.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Paddy, take care of yourself. Thanks for the chat, man. Take care.
yeah, all the best.
Bye bye.
Tony, can you tell me how the Hidden Omagh became into being?
Well, it's a book of local studies, and it was started through the school's curriculum project in the 1970s. In the beginning, Queen's University took the initiative and it sent down some people to work with teachers in Omagh High School and Omagh Christian Brothers School. And the idea was to use local history, local geography, and, if possible, some local English literature, and to integrate these into a local studies booklet. And finally, we produced the Hidden Omagh, which we hope was able to reveal to the children and to the adults of the district a lot of the history of the local area.
Not a lot has been written about Omagh down through the years. Where did you get the research from?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Most of the time we used Omagh street directories and bits and pieces from books like 100 Years of Milling. There wasn't, as you say, any substantial history on Omagh, and it was a matter of picking up those bits and pieces, interviewing older residents, and using material like the Omagh street directories, which were very useful and readily available in the Tyrone Constitution offices.
Okay, we've just arrived down here now in the Brookmount Road area of town, and we're just opposite Michael Street. Now this street's very well known because in fact it is, I think in the Book of Records, it's been the smallest street in Ireland.
Yes, that's right. It appears to be named as a street, but there's in fact only one house in it. It's named Michael Street, and the Irish is on the name plate as well, Sraig ní Bhícheál, which is St. Michael Street. Now the story is that they planned to make a terrace of houses down from Brookmount Road down to Brook Street, but that the developer never actually went ahead with the plans. They only built one house. Now we don't know whether it was an ancient form of planning permission or whether he ran out of ideas or ran out of funds, but there was some kind of hindrance and therefore it never was actually completed. But it is unique in Ireland in the fact that it is only one house in the street.
Okay, can we take a walk around the streets and have a wee look around?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, now we're walking across Brookmount Road here in town, just opposite St Connor's Primary School. This is a relatively new building as well.
This is Brook Street. This is a relatively new building. Yes, this was Brook Street, and quite a lot of houses right along here. On that far side where the school is roughly where the old Roman Catholic Church of St Peter and Paul was. Now, towards the Castle Street end or the Abbey Street end of it, there was about 10 or 12 houses, and along this side where we are, right from the Abbey Street end right away on out, there was about 40 or 50 houses. I have the details in the old street directory. But when we look at it, there are very few houses as such to be seen. But there must have been a lot of people living here in the times past, 100 years ago. In fact, if we look up now towards McElroy's, just below the church, there's a small car park. In fact, was in fact surrounded by streets. The one that ran across the face of McElroy's from Castle Street across was Castle Lane, and then coming downwards in an L shape was Fountain Lane. So that there were a lot of houses back in there, small, fairly poor houses, but at the same time they were family homes, and we can imagine there must have been a lot of houses in this area. If I can just check my totals here, I did a wee bit of homework on this, and there were in fact a total of 151 houses in this area. That includes Abbey Street, a little close or cul-de-sac called River Row, which is off Abbey Street, contained 9 houses. And if we take Abbey Street, River Row, Castle Lane, Fountain Lane and Brook Street, there were 151 houses, so there must have been a great density of population here in times past. Now there's hardly a house to be seen. A few derelict houses in an area called Convent View, but only 1 or 2 of them are still occupied.
The fact that very few residents even living in Castle Street today as well.
That's true. The whole nature of the area has changed over the years. It's much more commercial, and there are not so many people, as you say, living in it.
Okay, we're leading on out onto Castle Street.
Right. I was just going to say there that it was very interesting looking at the street directory of this area and of the different occupations that were to be seen. There were a lot of the labouring classes, you might say, but there was also some very interesting occupations like nailer, clog maker, rag gatherer, chimney sweep and scavenger. So that these were some very interesting, and these people actually claimed to be following such occupations, and they ended up being printed in the street directory.
What was a garrison town? Any idea how long it's been a garrison town at all?
The first map of Omagh shows a castle of the English way back in the 1600s in that area we now know as the Jail Square. That's probably the most ancient part of Omagh, because it started off as an abbey, and then from the 1600s it was the fort of the English, and then it became a jail. In fact, a new jail was built on that site, and now we see the remains of it in the present day. Perhaps we could take a walk up there and take a look round to see what are the remains to be seen. Now we're trying our best to get across Abbey Street, which in the old days was known as Brookmount Street, from the area across from Abbey Street towards the Derry Road. It's now known, the far side anyway, as Ashfield Terrace.
Right.
This is an interesting site here, the Hog's Head. It was known, or it's still known, as McConnell Place, and the person who owned the original bar was the name of McConnell, and the name of the bar was in fact the Stuart's Arms Hotel, and it then became the Military Arms. And in fact, on the old building, on the gable wall, there used to be a big shield or crest showing the Military Arms. It'd be interesting if anyone had a photograph of that area showing that old building with the Military Arms emblazoned on the wall.
Okay.
There's the military connection of this area as well, because as you know, the military barracks is not far up Abbey Street and round Barrack Lane.
And just as we speak, there are actually workmen working here at the moment.
Right, let's see that. You know, they seem to have taken a new interest in the place. It's not so bad, you know, but it seems in need of some attention. It's all been cleaned up. We're just going in under the archway. We can see that there was a double gate system. Gates would have been hung on those hinges there and on there. The background noise is the man working away as hard as he can. As we look to the left here, some of the more interesting buildings have been retained. The one in the middle, the one which has an octagonal shape, was the governor's house. It looks as if he was able to walk round his lounge and look out over the jail in every direction, because there's a window on each of those 8 sides, and there was a parapet, and there still is a parapet there which is railed, in which you could walk round and view all the activities without actually leaving the building. The bigger house on the left was the jail laundry, and this building on the right, which is fairly derelict but still got a roof on it, was the treadmill, and it was used for raising water from a deep well, probably down by the river. I'm not sure if it was used as a punishment exercise, but they did need water in the prison area, because in the 19th century, when the prison was at its height, there were 300 inmates being taken care of, so there would have been quite a lot of water needed for everyday use and for...
When did the jail finally close?
I think around the end of the 19th century or the earliest 20th century. I'd need to research that a bit, but it's very interesting, that story, because I was out in a townland called Dunteg, about 6 miles from Omagh here, and I was standing in a farmyard, and there was this old byre and hay shed, and I noticed that it was old and fairly substantial. In fact, what had happened was that they had bought the materials from Omagh Jail way back, maybe 50 or 80 years ago, and they had used it to build their own farmyard. And the lintel over the doorway actually had the word Debtors' Jail written on it, where the cows went in. So it was very interesting, and the old solid iron windows were still there with the bars on them, and they're used now as a farm building, so that's another example of recycling, perhaps. Over the wall here towards the River Strool and over into the showgrounds area, it's reckoned that this space was used as a burial ground, and it was also used as the hanging area. It could be easily viewed from the far side of the river, and the public was encouraged to witness these hangings, at least up until the last public hanging in 1860. Some interesting background noise. The last man hanged here was Peter Conway in 1880. Now, unusually, there is some remains of his hanging. The stone, his burial stone with PC 1880, is still preserved, and it actually has been built into the wall of the old school on Culmore Road, or on Tamlet Road, which is Culmore Old School. And it's built in, and you have to be very, very careful in trying to find it because it's built in upside down. So it's PC 1880 upside down.
Yeah. So executions in those days were a public event, obviously.
Right, they were right up until 1860. One of the executions that took place after that was, of course, the execution of Montgomery here, who was the inspector of police, who in fact was guilty of the murder of the cashier Newton Stewart. He uniquely investigated his own murder. Eventually, after some trials, he was found guilty and he was executed here on the site. But strangely, there is a rumour that the press were not allowed in to view the hanging, or I think maybe they were allowed in afterwards to view the body, but they were shown a body, and some of the press were not convinced. In fact, they might have considered that Montgomery evaded the hanging and probably ended his days in Australia or someplace like that, there in some foreign land.
'Tis many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for Sweet Omagh Town.